Hi everyone, and welcome to Two Thrifty Ladies. It's Ruth here and
Sue over here. We're next to each other, but we're not next to each other.
yes, but this is how we spend usual days.
Yes, it is. This is what we do.
Yes.
I'm here on the portal. Ruth is there on her portal for me, and voila, we are virtually together for hours at a time.
Yes, and it's true, it is hours. It can be 10, 12 hours sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. We've been known to morning till night.
Yep.
You know, through cooking dinner, eating dinner, breaks, laundry, who knows what.
Just get up and walk away.
Yep. And with me, I'm redoing a room down here, so it's a mess, but this is part one. Next time, hopefully, we'll have a part two on Ruth's, if she does another video, you'll see improvements. This will be my big craft and sewing room.
I can't wait.
I know, me too. I'm so excited.
She's going to have the nice big cutting tables.
Yes. Yep.
So you know where Ruth will be.
That's right. We're going to be getting together here. Yay.
So
fun.
The reason for today's visit, we are going to do a DIY, and we are going to make a homespun / what's another word for it? Primitive throw. And it's going to be a quilt as you go. So I know that a lot of times that we talk about jelly rolls and the quickness of a jelly roll, but today, Sue and I took some of Sue's fabric and we cut our own jelly rolls. Our own jelly rolls.
Yep. So now they're being put to use, which is really awesome.
Yes. Yep. So today we're going to use them. And I already took one apart. I'm going to lower you so you can see it. I do believe I'm going to use 2 jelly rolls, maybe even 3, but at the end. And this is another, I don't know what it looks like, but you'll know what it looks like at the beginning of the video. I just don't know what it looks like because we're just, we're going through how my mind works. So I'm starting with it's going to be quilt as you go. We're going to do we're not going to do binding. It's going to be a self-binding. And I'll explain that later on when I show you the fabric. But my back piece is going to be 2 yards of homespun red plaid. Right? Gingham?
Yeah, gingham. It's a check. I would say it's a red check. Yep, exactly. Yep. And
Sue's going to be here to guide us on.
Yes, fabulous fabric. I can't wait to see this going through the process.
I know.
All right.
I'm going to move the camera and I'll be right back to show you what I'm starting with, what you'll need for supplies, and we'll get going because this throw size quilt will measure about 50. I'm going to try to make it as big as my last video, so I'm aiming for 58 long by 44 wide is what I'm going to try to gun for. And not, because it's a prairie style primitive, I'm not putting any borders on this one. And we're going to self-bind it as we go. So that's the size I'm going to shoot for, and you'll be able to finish this in one day or one weekend or 1 week.
Depending on what time you start and stop and how many breaks you take and where you need to go and what you need to do.
That's right. But, and there's no limit. It doesn't matter.
For you, Ruth, this is going to be done, in less than 45 minutes?
Yes.
The length of the video?
Sue has put me on a timer now, people. So, yes. Yes. So, let's get started.
All right.
So welcome back. So the backing that I decided to use today is this nice red checkered. I'm going to just bring you in just a little bit to see if you can see it. Is that not gorgeous fabric? It's a 2-yard cut. And here is the jelly roll I'm going to use. And you get all of these nice primitive colors. This one right here is my absolute favorite. So this is all this is. It's got some green checked in there, which is the same as the backing, which I love. And I'll be mixing this. I know that this one jelly roll isn't going to be enough, so we will be adding a second one in. But this is what it is. So the first step is to take your 2 yards of fabric and you want to iron it, because we always want to start with an iron piece of fabric. The next thing that I want to do on this particular piece is that, as you notice, the sides, they tend to be a fraying. And they're not really fraying, it's just the end of the fabric and the way it was cut. So I folded it up. You want to make careful not to sew on a fold, because then you'll ruin your fabric. So I just got all my raw edges together, and I'm just going to go down and cut those off. So we have a nice piece of fabric. And I'm going to do it down both. This is the side that they cut the fabric from, so it's, you know, I don't know how they do it, but it's never even. So I'm going to go down the side first, and I'm going to get rid of all this excess. So let me do that. Okay, now that I have cut my sides and my top and bottom so that they're somewhat even, I just wanted to go back and tell you what I mean by the self-binding. So what I'm going to do is, when I attach my jelly strips, I'm going to leave along the top 1 inch. So when I do my first one, I'm gonna leave a 1 inch gap, maybe 1.25 inches, because at the end we'll be putting our binding and then folding it over the edge, and that's what gives us our self-binding blanket, or throw quilt as we're gonna call it. So I am leaving 1.25 inches just to have some leeway on the top and the bottom and each side. But since we're doing a quilt as we go, we're going to take our fabric that has been trimmed, so it's straight, except for that piece right there that I missed. We won't talk about this piece. There. So, and now we're going to add our batting, because we're going to be quilting as we go, and you'll see that as we go along, we'll be quilting the batting right into our backing, and that'll give us our top and bottom both quilted at the same time. So let's make those two together. You can either lightly baste it with spray baste, or you can pin it. And I'm going to do the pin it method, because I tend to make a mess when I use basting spray. So let me do that and we'll see what that looks like. Okay, so I went around and I had pinned the batting just around the outside, and I went about 1.5 to 2 inches below, even though I said 1 inch to 1.5 inches. I know some of my spots around the top might be close to 2 inches, and down along the side it's about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. So, and on this side it's about 1.5 inches. So I'm not going to worry, because the edges, like I said, we're going to fold in that binding. So even if the batting isn't there, we're going to catch the end of our jelly strips, and that will make more sense as we get down there more. So let me show you how we're going to do this. This is extremely easy. If you don't have a jelly roll strips are 2.5 inches wide per length of fabric. Don't want them 2.5 inches? Don't worry. These can be as big as you want them to be, as wide as you want them to be. If you want your strips, if you want to use less strips and you want your strips to be 5 inches wide, that is totally fine, because it's your quilt. I'm using the jelly strips that Sue and I had cut, and that's why mine are at 2.5 inches. And I like to do jelly roll friendly items, because my life is all about jelly rolls right now, and I have a ton of them, because Sue makes me collect them. So here we go. So we're not going to start right at the top, because that's not how we're going to do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our jelly roll, our first strip, no matter the size, and because my back is the full length of fabric, your jelly roll is going to be almost as wide as that. But we are only sewing up to about the end of our batting. So we're going to take the first one, And I'm going to have it be about, because I know mine are 2.5 inches wide, I'm going to have mine 2.5 inches below my batting. And I'm going to lay it out across the middle. Then I'm going to take my next strip and I'm going to lay it right side down on top of this strip. And I haven't sewed anything yet. You're welcome to pin this, clip this, hold this, whatever you want. I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the top of the two. And I know it's below, we're leaving below this because when I open, once we've stitched this, we're going to open it and you'll actually have 2 strips. And this will all be sewn in and it will open and that'll be the first 2 strips of your quilt. So go again. We're going to take our first strip and I'm going to leave it because my width is 2.5 inches. I'm going to have it 2.5 inches below my batting. If your strips are 4 inches thick, you can lay it out 4 inches below or anywhere you would want it to be. But I want this to be able to open up to cover my batting. So I laid that one down. I'm taking my next strip and I'm not going to pin it. I'm just going to carry it over to my machine. And I'm going to put right sides together and I'm going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way across. And I'm starting at the beginning of my batting and I'm going to sew all the way over to the other end of my batting. And I'm just going to leave these ends to hang there for now because they're the full length of the fabric, the full width, which is what our backing is. But because we're having a self-binding, we don't need that extra. So we'll trim it at the end. So for now, and that's all you got to do. And then after, we're going to fold it open. And we've made this quilted line because by sewing in here, we've actually quilted the batting down with the backing. And on the back of your quilt, you'll see that first line of quilting. So we're going to sew that one like this. So let me do that and I'll be right back. Okay, so I took the batting and I pinned it all along the outside and I left 1.5 inches to 2 inches around the whole outside. So that way we can begin. And I didn't bother pinning it in the middle because once we start sewing, it's going to hold itself. So to make this quilt, to make it as we quilt as we go, all we're going to do is I have 2.5 inch strips is the strips wide that we decided to do on this quilt. We, as in you and I. And it runs the full length of the fabric because that's how it was cut. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the first strip, I'm going to lay it face up and I'm going to bring it down about 2.5 inches from the top. The next thing I'm going to do is take my next strip and I'm going to lay it right sides together on top of this strip. You can pin this if you would like, wonder clip it, safety pin it, and bring it over to your machine. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be a rebel and hope I get it right. And I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance all along the top. And I'm going to start at one end of my batting and I'm going to stitch it 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way across to the other end and I'm going to stop at my batting. Then after that you're going to be able to open it up and where we put this on, it flips up and it'll cover the top of your batting. And that'll be your first 2 strips on your quilt. Now here's where we'll be sewing them together and on the back it will also be quilting that line down because you'll be stitching it right onto the back. And that'll be your top 2. Then we're going to take the next strip And I'm going to put them right sides together. And this time, because we're going to be working from top to bottom, so now I'm going to be sewing a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the bottom, because we're going downward. So that's a good way to remember it. We're going from top to bottom, so we're going to sew along the bottom. And once this one is done, we'll be able to flip it over. You can finger press it or you can iron it, whatever one you do, because it is going to lay nice and flat. If you have a small iron and want to keep it next to you, this is a perfect time to use it. And then we'll have 3 strips sewn. And then I'll take the next one and so on and so on and so on. So only for the top, because this one will go on the top, so we're going to sew it along the top and flip it up towards the top. My 3rd strip will go right sides together. Oops. Pull you out there. My 3rd one will go right sides together, and because we're going downward, we're going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the bottom. So let's go do these first 3 and I'll be right back. Hi everyone, I'm back at my machine and I'm about to stitch my first strip on, but I wanted to talk to you first about thread choice because it's something I didn't mention before I came over to my machine. So on our machine, our top thread that we use up top is not going to be seen because it'll be hidden behind our strips. But our bottom thread is going to be seen on the back of our quilt. So if you want a coordinating thread, now is the time to put it into your bobbin because that's going to show. I'm going to use white on white. So white will show on the back of mine, but I'm okay with the white showing because it's red and white checkered. So to me, that's fine. But if I had a bright orange and green fabric, I might want an orange or green thread. So I just wanted to come in real quick to tell you that. So now let me go ahead and get those strips done so we can see what the beginning of it's going to look like. Okay, so what I've done was I've done my first 3 strips. And as you can see, the top one, I stitched the 1/4 inch seam allowance and flipped it up. And then my next one I did at the bottom because we're working down to the bottom. So we're going to stitch on the bottom. You know, I think we're working downward, so we're stitching on the down part, on the bottom part. And that's what these first three look like. I did not iron them. I just finger pressed it open before I did the next one. And on the back, I used the white thread, and you really can't see it. You can see that it's quilted, but you really can't see the white thread on the bottom. So this is going to be quilted as we go, because every strip will be a quilted line. So now I'm going to continue on. I'm going to add my next strip, front to front, and then I'm going to stitch along the bottom, and I'm going to fold that one down, finger press it open, and then I'm going to add my next strip with right sides together, and I'm going to quarter inch stitch along the bottom. So let's continue, and I'll be back in a while. Alright, so I've gone ahead and I've attached all of my strips, and this is what they look like. And all I did was I just opened them back up and seam, just hand patched them, finger pressed them, added the next one, sewed the 1/4 inch, folded it open, finger pressed it, added the next one, and I did that all the way across. So now we're at the part of trimming, and as you see, your bottom or top, however you do it, it's going to have all these extras, and that's fine. So there's more than one way that you can trim this. You can take your scissors and hand cut along the sides to even all of this up, or you can fold the back under, and you could take your rotary cutter and even it up. I am going to take my scissors, and I'm going to use my scissors. And in the original, when you had cut, you know, when we had pulled the strips away and we had pinned it, if you notice that as you get down to the bottom, you have a lot of extra binding, because as we're compressing and quilting, it's gonna stretch it out. So you'll have extra at the end, and that's okay. You can trim that up. So now all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go along the bottom, and I'm gonna make everything nice and even, and I wanna give myself that 1.5 inches around the outside. But if you don't want to cut your strip, you don't have to, because when we attach it all together, whatever part of that strip that's hanging out is going to be added into the seam allowance for the binding. So it's more important just to go down the sides and leave that 1.5 inch border. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna take my scissors. Now I had only sewn until my binding, so I know I have that much there, and that's all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go down and cut it. And you can save your pieces if you want to use them for something else. You want to make really good sure that if you're using your scissors and not your rotary cutter, you are not cutting your backing material, because I have done it. So I know not to do it, but you know, things happen and we're human, and if you happen to have cut your backing, that's okay. Take your scissors and cut your strip down more, and we'll just get rid of the cut part. That's fine. So I'm gonna go ahead and go on, and I'm gonna cut all my material, all the edges off, so that everything has the same. And that's all I'm gonna do. And if it's not totally straight, let me bring this down so you can see it better. If you're not totally straight on your cutting, say one is like I have a little bit of longer here, that's okay, because when we go to do the next step and we're folding in and then refolding, no one is gonna know that you have not cut it evenly, because we're gonna hide it all in the seam. So that's our next step, is go along and cut all of these extra pieces off so that everything is ready to go for the next step. So let me do that and I'll be right back. Okay, so here we are. We have trimmed up our strips, and now it's time to close up our backing to make our own self-binding. And this is super easy. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna fold down our backing so it's just above our strips. So we're just gonna fold it down. Now we should have 1.5 inches here. So we're gonna do it in half, like 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch. That's one fold, and then the second fold is gonna go right over our edges of our strips. So it's gonna look like this. So I'll do that again. We are gonna fold down, and if you want, you can iron this if you would like to. I'm not going to, but you're welcome to. And I got my pins, because you're welcome to pin it. Wonder clip would be a good thing at this point. Safety pins, however you want to do it. Or you can be a rebel, like I like to be, and just fold as you go. So we're gonna fold it down so that our tip matches the tip of our strips. And then we're gonna fold it again and cover up the top of our seam. Now, if you notice, this is about 3/4 of an inch in. And pin it. And I'm going to stitch 1/4 of an inch up from the bottom, and I'm gonna stitch it all the way across. If you feel as though this is too much of a big binding for you, you can cut this back to 1/2 inch. Fold down 1/4 of an inch, and then fold it on top of itself again. However you feel most comfortable with. You know, maybe you'll look at it and, I mean, this is almost 1 inch if I fold it that way. So maybe 1 inch is too much for me. So fold it any way you want, but that's all you have to do is fold it in half, fold it in half again, pin it, clip it, snip it. Well, not snip it. Clip it. Pin it. And then I'm going to sew the 1/4 inch seam allowance. So let me do a few of stitches, show you where I'm at, and then we'll get to that corner. Okay, so I've gone ahead and stitched this a 1/4 inch seam, and there is a little stick up. If you don't like the little bit sticking up, you can do a nice 1/8 inch, go right up against it if you like. Or as I mentioned earlier, you can fold this smaller so that you don't have such a big edging. So now I've come to the corner and I've just stitched straight off. So now it's time to turn the corner. So we're going to do the same thing we did on the first side. We're going to fold this up so it's at the bottom of our strips. And then we're going to fold again. And the corner... I'm trying to do this with the camera sitting on my lap. So right here. And this is how your corner will look. So I'm going to come over here now and I'm going to stitch straight down. And it's going to make like a little block with your thread. And I'm still using the white on white because the white really blends in good with this backing. But again, if your backing was bright orange or green, then perhaps you'd want to switch your thread out. But I'm okay with the white. So all I did was I stitched right off. I fold up to the top of my strips. And then I'm going to fold it again. And this is what my corner will look like. So now I'm going to come up here. And I'm going to stitch down. So let me do that and I'll show you what the corner looks like in our next step. So I just wanted to take a minute to show you my corner. And this is what it looks like. It's just a squared off corner. If you wanted to pull it in on an angle, you could do that. But I kind of like the squared off corners. So my quilt is finished. I've done all the sides. And now I'll take it outside so you can get a better look at it. So here's the finished quilt. I absolutely love my primitive colored quilt. All I have to do is go back through and clip some little threads here and there. Oh, that wasn't even a thread attached. This is what my corners look like. This is what the back looks like. I absolutely love it. So I ended up using 2 jelly rolls. So, and I had 4 strips left, so it's 2 jelly rolls. Again, if you wanted to make these strips yourself and use your own material, you can make these all different sizes. Mine just happened to be the width of a jelly roll, so they're 2.5 inches. But you can use any width you would like, and that would just be the less because the fabric is 2 yards, so you're going to use up 2 yards of material, and then the width is the width of the fabric. And I think this is a perfect way to bind your quilt. It makes a nice throw size, and I absolutely love it. So that's it. I hope you liked my tutorial. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up. Follow us and click the little bell. That way you'll know when we have a video uploaded. I have a couple more sewing projects coming up, but this is my primitive lap throw, and it's perfect to cuddle up on the couch, watch TV, or do whatever. So in the description box, I'll also put a link to my Etsy store, which is where this will end up. So, and if you make something following my guidelines, you know, just put a picture down below. We'd love to see it. Shout out to everybody and have a great day. Thanks for watching.